Felicity James had just closed a multi-million-dollar merger when the power went out, and for the first time in years, she wasn't in control of anything. The hotel plunged into darkness with a deep mechanical hum, like the building exhaled its last breath. Emergency lights flickered once, then failed. A chorus of confused murmurs echoed through the hallway outside her penthouse suite on the 53rd floor. She grabbed her phone, but the screen was dead. Of course. The signal had been spotty all day. Typical, she muttered under her breath, heels clicking as she stepped into the hallway filled with nervous guests and staff. The air conditioning had already shut off, and the late summer heat pressed in like a damp hand. "Ma'am, miss," a voice called from behind. As she turned, a man stood there holding a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, on his hip. The child clung to him, sleepy but alert. The man looked rough around the edges: gray t-shirt, jeans, stubble that hadn't seen a razor in 2 days, but his eyes were sharp, focused. Protective. Warm. "You shouldn't be up here," he said, shifting the kid on his arm. "Stairwells are our only way down. Elevators are dead." "I'm aware," she said coolly, lifting her chin. "I was just about to." He cut her off. "You're wearing heels. You'll break your neck by floor 40. Come on, I'll help you down." She blinked. "Excuse me." He looked her dead in the eye. "Look, I'm trying to get my kid out of here, and I don't have time to argue. Either you stay up here waiting for someone who's not coming, or you stick with me." "I don't even know you." "Name's Vaughn Hayes," he said, shifting his son. "This is Oliver. We were supposed to be in a room on the 22nd floor, but they overbooked and bumped us up. I'm not trying to rob you, lady. I just don't want you passing out halfway down." Felicity hesitated. The boy looked up at her. "It's really dark," Oliver whispered. Something in her chest cracked open a little. "Fine," she muttered. "Let's go." They entered the stairwell. It was pitch black. He took the lead, flashlight from his pocket casting a dim glow. She followed behind, gripping the railing, heels clicking until she finally gave up and pulled them off, carrying them in one hand. "Careful," he warned, pausing to let her catch up. "There's water on this step." She almost slipped. His hand shot out, steadying her waist. Warm, firm, gentle. "Thanks," she muttered. "You okay?" "I'm fine." They kept going, floor by floor. The air got thicker, hotter. "Oliver," Vaughn whispered over his shoulder, "you doing okay?" "Yeah, Daddy," the boy mumbled, head on his shoulder now. "I'm sleepy." "I know, bud, almost there." Felicity stared at the back of Vaughn's neck, the curve of his shoulders. He looked tired, like the kind of tired that didn't come from one night of bad sleep, but from life itself. "You a single dad?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "His mom left when he was 3, haven't seen her since." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "We manage." They reached the 30th floor. She was sweating, her silk blouse stuck to her back. "Break," he said, setting Oliver down. The boy sat on a step, rubbing his eyes. Vaughn handed her a protein bar from his backpack. "You look like you haven't eaten in a while." "I had a glass of champagne and 2 almonds around 3, she replied, deadpan. He chuckled. "Figures." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You just have that high-powered boardroom energy, like you spend your life bossing people around." "I do," she said flatly. "I'm the CEO of James and Rowe." He blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously." He let out a low whistle. "Guess I'm escorting royalty down the stairs." "Guess you are," she said, trying not to smile. They kept walking. Somewhere around the 20th floor, the light in his flashlight blinked. Then died. Felicity froze. "Oh no." "Don't panic," Vaughn said. "Give me your hand." She hesitated, then reached out. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and rough. Strong. He guided her carefully, counting steps aloud for her, warning her of every turn. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. From him. They reached the lobby nearly 45 minutes later. She was barefoot, drenched in sweat, and had lost all sense of dignity, but she was laughing. Actually laughing. "I can't believe we made it," she breathed, setting her heels down and leaning against the wall. Vaughn glanced down at Oliver, who had finally dozed off in his arms. "Told you I'd get you out." "You did," she said softly. A hotel employee approached them, offering water bottles and flashlights. Vaughn took one and handed it to her first. Chivalrous, even now. "You need a ride?" she asked, almost against her better judgment. He shook his head. "Nah, I'll call a cab once we're outside." She hesitated. "You sure?" He nodded. "We'll be okay." Felicity stared at him. This man had carried his son through 50 flights of stairs, guided her through darkness, didn't complain once, and now was walking into the night like it was just another Tuesday. "Wait," she said quickly. "Are you staying in the city long?" He gave her a half smile. "I live here, Queens." "Oh. Not exactly your part of town, huh?" "No," she admitted. "Not really." He turned to go. "Vaughn," she said suddenly. He looked back. "Thank you." "Anytime, CEO," he said, then disappeared into the crowd. She stood there, staring after him, heart pounding. And for the first time in her life, Felicity James didn't want to be alone at the top anymore. Felicity didn't expect to see him again. Yet 3 days later, there he was standing in the lobby of her office building, holding a maintenance clipboard and wearing a navy polo with Wexler Mechanical stitched over the heart. She stopped mid-step, phone pressed to her ear, staring like she'd seen a ghost with stubble and work boots. He glanced up, did a double take, and blinked. "You work here?" he asked, lowering the clipboard. "I own this building," she said, slowly pulling the phone from her ear and ending the call without a word of explanation. "What are you doing here?" "Elevator inspections." He gestured vaguely upward. "Quarterly checks. Someone upstairs called in a complaint about the west shaft stalling." She took in the heavy-duty tool belt around his hips, the worn ID badge clipped to his shirt, and something inside her stilled. "You're a technician," she said slowly. He tilted his head, a faint crease appearing between his brows. "Was that not allowed?" "No, it's not that," just her voice faltered. "I didn't expect you to be here, today, in this building. I didn't expect to be recognized by a woman who climbs stairs in designer heels and closes mergers before breakfast," he said, adjusting the strap of his bag. "But here we are." She stared at him, then at the clipboard, then back at him. "Do you have a few minutes?" He hesitated. "Depends." On whether this is a polite chat, or I'm being escorted out by security." "I don't have time for polite," she said, already turning toward the private elevator. "Come on." He followed her in silence. The doors closed with a quiet hiss as they ascended to the top floor. Her office was minimal in color, but maximal in scale floor-to-ceiling windows, a sleek marble desk, and an uninterrupted view of Manhattan that usually made people forget how to speak. Vaughn walked in, took one look around, and muttered, "Yes, this tracks." She turned to face him, arms crossed. "Why didn't you tell me what you did?" "You didn't ask." "I assumed." "I know what you assumed," he said, voice calm but firm. "That I was some guy passing through, maybe crashing in a budget hotel with his kid, that we'd never cross paths again." "You weren't wrong," she admitted, her tone softer. "But still, you let me think." I didn't let you think anything, he said. We were escaping a building in the dark. I wasn't exactly handing out resumes. Felicity exhaled and moved to sit on the edge of her desk. You know, I've had 3 people promoted to executive partner this week. I've made decisions that affected hundreds of jobs, but I haven't stopped thinking about you. He leaned against the window frame, arms crossed now too. That's a lot to say to a guy you barely know. I know more than you think, she said, eyes holding his. You're steady under pressure. You put your kid first. You didn't ask me for anything, not even after you realized who I was. That's the bar for decency now. No, she said, but it's rare. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced out at the skyline, then back at her. Oliver's with my neighbor today, he said finally. She's a nurse, works nights. We trade off when our shifts overlap. It's not ideal, but it works. She nodded once. You ever get time for yourself? Not really, he said, but I don't mind, he's a good kid. Smart, doesn't ask for much. What about you? She asked. Do you ask for anything? He hesitated. No, I learned not to. Something sharp and bittersweet flickered in her chest. I want to take you to dinner, she said. He blinked. You're serious. I don't say things I don't mean. And that's not a pity invite. Do I look like I pity you? He studied her for a long moment, then looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't exactly blend in at places you probably go to. Then we'll go somewhere else. He gave a quiet laugh. You don't stop, do you? Not unless I want to. And you want to. She nodded once. With you, yes. He didn't speak for a moment, then finally said, all right, but only if it's somewhere that serves real food. No foam, no edible flowers. Deal, she said, smiling. He pushed off the window and walked toward the door. Vaughn, she said before he left. He paused. Where's something without a logo? He grinned over his shoulder. You got it, CEO. The door closed behind him, and Felicity stared at it for a long moment, pulse fluttering. She wasn't sure what she'd just started. But for once, she didn't want to be sure. She just wanted to see where it would lead. The restaurant was tucked between a florist's and a corner bookstore in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of place with no sign out front and a line if you didn't know the hostess by name. Vaughn arrived first. He wore a button down the color of deep cobalt, sleeves rolled once at the forearm. He looked like he'd tried, but not too hard a man who didn't mind attention, but didn't invite it either. Felicity arrived 8 minutes late, her driver waiting discreetly at the curb. She stepped out in a midnight blue dress that was cut clean and sharp, like everything she touched. Her heels clicked gently against the concrete as she approached, and when she saw Vaughn standing at the host stand, she paused. You clean up well, she said, stopping just in front of him. You look like someone who owns the sky, he replied, holding the door open for her. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with quiet energy-low lights, soft jazz, the scent of garlic and wine steeped into the walls. The hostess led them to a table in the back, half shielded by a velvet curtain that offered just enough privacy without feeling hidden. As soon as they sat, Vaughn leaned back and surveyed the room. So this your scene? I've never been here before, she replied, unfolding her napkin. Asked my assistant to find something that didn't have a Michelin star. That's a first, he said, raising an eyebrow. A billionaire outsourcing how to be normal. I'm not a billionaire, she said without looking up. He leaned forward slightly. Then, who owns the company jet I saw parked outside JFK this morning? She met his eyes, technically the company. He gave a quiet laugh and picked up the menu. You ever eat pasta that doesn't have truffle oil in it? I have, she said, but I was under duress. He glanced up, eyes warm. This might be the first time I've seen you smile without planning it." She didn't answer, but her fingers tapped once against the tablecloth. The waiter came, and they ordered. He chose the gnocchi with braised short rib. She picked the squid ink tagliatelle, and they split a bottle of red from a vineyard Vaughn admitted he couldn't pronounce. After the first few bites, she set her fork down. "So how did you end up in elevators?" He chewed, swallowed, then took a sip of wine before answering. "My dad, he was a field tech for 30 years, taught me everything before I turned 16. After he died, I took over his clients, started freelancing, got certified." "Is that what you wanted to do?" "No," he said, "but it made sense. I needed something that paid steady and gave me time to be a father." She tilted her head. "What did you want?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I wanted to be a carpenter, build furniture, design spaces that made people feel something. But that dream got smaller when Oliver came along." "Smaller or clearer?" He considered that, maybe both. Felicity refilled her glass. "You know, I don't think I've ever sat across from a man who didn't ask me how much I make." "I already know you don't have to check your bank balance before ordering wine," he said, dabbing his mouth with his napkin. "That's not the part that interests me." "Then what does?" "How someone like you ends up alone at the top." She didn't respond right away. The jazz track shifted to something slower, more mournful. "I was engaged once," she said eventually. "He was from the same world, we made perfect sense on paper, but in real life he couldn't stand that I didn't need him." Vaughn didn't flinch. "He told me I made him feel small," she continued. "I offered to scale back, he left anyway." He nodded slowly. "And you haven't tried since?" "No one's tried me since," she said plainly. "Not really." "I'm not afraid of being needed less," he said. "I just want to know I'm wanted." She looked at him, throat tightening unexpectedly. "I do want you here." "I know," he said. "That's why it came." They finished dinner quietly. No awkward silences, just the kind of quiet that made room for thoughts that didn't need explaining. When the check arrived, Vaughn reached for it. Felicity raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him. "I can afford it," he said, reading her expression. "I never said you couldn't." He signed the receipt with a steady hand and stood. "Come on, let's walk." Outside, the air had cooled. The streetlights cast soft golden halos over the sidewalk. Felicity slipped her arm through his without thinking, and he didn't comment on it. They walked slowly, past shuttered bookstores and window displays full of vintage records and hand-poured candles. "You always live in the city?" she asked. "Born and raised," he said. "Queens, never left." "Why not?" "I've got roots here, and Oliver. He's got friends, school, a routine. I'm not chasing anything." She nodded. "That's rare." "What about you?" he asked. "You ever think about leaving all this behind?" "All the time," she said instantly, "but I don't know who I'd be without it." He stopped walking and turned toward her. They stood under a street lamp, shadows dancing across their faces. "You'd still be this," he said. "Sharp, fierce, the kind of woman who climbs 50 flights and doesn't complain once." "I did complain," she whispered. "But you didn't stop." She looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was too close now, or maybe just close enough. His hand brushed her arm, tentative at first, then more certain. "Vaughn," she said, her voice low. He didn't say anything. She leaned in. Their lips met slow, certain, not rushed, not uncertain, just real, like something earned. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I don't usually do this," she murmured. "Neither do I," he said. They stood there for a while longer. No one passed by. The city, for once, seemed to hold its breath. Eventually, he pulled back and looked at her. "What happens now?" he asked. She took a breath. "You tell me when you're free next, and I'll make sure I am." He nodded once. "Friday," he said. "I'm off at 5. I'll pick you up at 6. He smiled, then stepped back. "Don't be late, CEO." "Never," she said. As he walked away, she turned and leaned against the edge of a brick building, pressing a hand to her chest. Something had shifted, and she wasn't afraid of it. The industrial lot in Long Island City didn't look like much from the outside, just another warehouse with steel roll-up doors and a faded mural of a bird mid-flight. But inside, it smelled of cedar and varnish, and the hum of sanders and saws filled the space with quiet, grounded energy. Vaughn stood at a long work table, smoothing the edge of a walnut slab, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, eyes steady. He didn't look up when the heavy door buzzed and opened behind him, but when her heels clicked against the concrete floor, he set his tool down. "You're early," he said, brushing sawdust from his hands. "You said you had something to show me," Felicity replied, walking past racks of half-finished chairs and tabletops. "I rearranged my entire board lunch for this. Hope it's worth it." He reached for a tarp covering something large near the back wall. "I didn't ask you to move your schedule." "You didn't have to," her voice softened. "I wanted to." He pulled the tarp back, revealing a dining table long, low sheen, with live edges that curved like riverbanks. The grain ran through it like a story told in wind and time. "This is what I do when no one's watching," he said. "It's not for sale, not part of the job. I just needed to make something that stays." She stepped forward, laying her fingers on the wood. "You built this." "Took 6 weekends," he said, "mostly at night after Oliver went to sleep." "It's beautiful." "It's ours," he said. She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you want it, for the place you haven't told me about yet, the one you think about when you're tired of penthouses and boardrooms." "I don't have that place," she said. "But you could," he replied. "You just haven't let yourself picture it." Her breath caught. "You really think we'd make it outside of all this?" "I think we've already made it," he said. "We just haven't stepped into it yet." She turned away, stared at the soft light bleeding through the windows. "I spent years building something no one could take from me. I didn't expect to want anything else." "You don't have to give anything up," he said, "but maybe you get to want more now." She turned back to him. "This thing between us, it doesn't make sense on paper." "Neither does a tree growing through concrete," he said, "but it still happens." That night, she didn't return to her apartment across the river. She stayed, not because she had to, but because something inside her shifted and settled. Vaughn cooked nothing extravagant, just grilled vegetables and roasted chicken on a camping stove in the corner of the workshop. They ate at the table he built, barefoot, knees brushing. She laughed more than she had in months. 3 weeks later, she picked up Oliver from school for the first time. He stood by the gate, backpack too big for his shoulders, eyes squinting in the sun. When he saw her, he hesitated, then ran forward. "Daddy said you might come," he said, peering up at her. "Did he?" she replied, crouching to meet his gaze. "He said you're the boss of everything." She smiled. "Not everything." "You want to come see my science fair next week?" "I wouldn't miss it," she said. When Vaughn got home that night, he found both of them at the dining table. Oliver was showing her a cardboard volcano that didn't quite stand up straight. She was holding it carefully, nodding like it was priceless. "This mean I don't have to bribe you with pasta to come over anymore?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. She looked up at him, eyes clear. "It means I'm already here." The following month, she signed the papers for a brownstone in Carroll Gardens. Not a penthouse, not a fortress, just a place with sunlit windows and uneven floorboards and enough space for a workshop downstairs. The night before the move, She stood in the center of the empty living room, watching Vaughn adjust the legs on the dining table, their table. Oliver sat cross-legged nearby, coloring a picture of a rocket ship. "You know," she said, "I never believed in fate or luck or second chances." He looked up, and now I believe in stairwells," she said. He crossed the room in 2 steps and kissed her, slow and certain, the way he had that night under the street lamp, only now there was no uncertainty. No questions left. Later, on the rooftop under strings of soft lights, with a few close friends and the city blinking around them like a slow heartbeat, Vaughn took her hand. "You ready?" he asked. "For forever," she replied. He nodded once. She tightened her fingers around his. "I already am." They didn't need to say vows to prove anything. There was no need for declarations in marble halls. It was in the way Oliver fell asleep curled between them during movie nights, in the smell of sawdust and ink on their new mornings, in the sound of her laughter echoing in a home that belonged to all 3 of them. They built a life, not just out of love but out of choice. And this time, it was stronger than anything either of them had built alone. The first snowfall of the season came quietly, blanketing the brownstone's rooftop in a soft hush that made the city feel like a secret. Vaughn stood at the wide kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the flakes slip past the glass like drifting stars. Behind him, Felicity sat on the floor surrounded by scattered papers, fabric swatches, and a half-assembled mood board. "Tell me again why we're not hiring someone for this," he asked without turning. "Because don't want anyone else deciding what color the nursery walls should be," she answered, pulling a pale sage sample closer. "And I'm not letting some social media designer convince me to paint everything white and hang up a neon sign that says "Dream big, little one." He chuckled and turned around. "You've officially become the most particular person in Brooklyn." She looked up from the scattered plans. "That can't possibly be true." "Trust me, I've met people who have demanded imported Italian marble for their mudroom. You still win." She laughed, setting the swatch aside. "I just want it to be right, not perfect, just right." He walked over and lowered himself beside her, one hand resting gently on the slight curve of her belly. "It will be." She leaned into him, shoulder to shoulder. "Are you ready for another one?" "No," he said easily. "But I wasn't ready the first time either, and look how that turned out." Her smile softened. "Oliver's going to be a great big brother." "He's already bragging about it at school. Told his teacher the baby's going to be named after his favorite comic book character." Her eyes widened. "You didn't let him think." "I told him we'd consider it," Vaughn said, "which is technically not a no." She groaned and leaned her head against his arm. Later that week, they hosted a small gathering in the brownstone, just a few close friends, Oliver's favorite neighbor from down the block, and Vaughn's sister, who had flown in from Colorado with her twin boys and a suitcase full of knitted baby clothes. The house buzzed with conversation, laughter echoing up the stairs, the smell of cinnamon and roasted pecans in the air. Felicity stood in the dining room, arms crossed, watching Vaughn explain a woodworking project to Oliver and the twins, who watched him with rapt attention. Her friend Clara stepped beside her, glass of sparkling cider in hand. "So this is what happiness looks like on you?" Clara asked. Felicity didn't look away from Vaughn. "I wasn't sure I'd recognize it." Clara nudged her. "You're glowing, and I'm not just saying that because you're pregnant." "It's different," Felicity admitted. "This isn't the life I planned, but it's the one I chose." Clara tilted her head. "And the company?" "Still mine, still growing," she said, "but I'm not chasing everything anymore. I'm building." Clara raised her glass. "To building." Felicity touched her glass to Clara's. "To grounding." That night, after everyone had left and Oliver had fallen asleep in his new bunk bed that he and Vaughn had built together, she found him upstairs in the nursery. He was standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered street below, one hand resting on the windowsill, the other tucked into his pocket. "You're quiet," she said, stepping inside. He glanced back, just thinking. About how fast everything changed, he said. "A year ago, I was fixing elevators and counting pennies to buy Oliver new school shoes. Now I'm standing in a room we painted together, waiting for a baby, in a house I didn't even imagine having." She stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Do you miss it?" "No," he said, turning to face her. "I just never thought life would give me a second shot." "You didn't wait for it," she said. "You built it." They stood like that for a long time, watching the snow fall in silence. Then she reached for his hand, tugged him gently back toward their bedroom. 3 months later, on a crisp spring morning, their daughter was born. Her name was not comic book inspired, despite Oliver's best efforts, but he was the first person to hold her after Felicity and Vaughn. He looked down at her, wide-eyed and solemn, then whispered, "I'll take care of you forever." The hospital room was flooded with sunlight when Vaughn sat beside Felicity's bed, their daughter sleeping against her chest. "You told me once you wanted to build furniture because it made people feel something," she said softly. "I remembered." "Well," she whispered, "you built this too." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Best thing I've ever made." They brought her home on a Sunday. The brownstones smelled like lavender and lemon from the candles Vaughn had lit earlier. Oliver handed them a hand-drawn sign that said, "Welcome, baby," complete with hearts and a rainbow that stretched across the page. They hung it above the crib. That night, after the baby had drifted off and Oliver was tucked in, Vaughn and Felicity stood on the rooftop, wrapped in a blanket, city lights flickering around them. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I think we were always heading this way. We just didn't know it." She rested her head against his chest. "I love you." He kissed her hair, then whispered, "I know, I love you more." And in the quiet that followed, surrounded by the life they had chosen and the love they had built, neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to.